I think they can see the panelists, but there's 17 attendees. We got 10 of us from the committee here. So, you know, I'm happy to include everyone if that's okay, Samara, so we can all see
to promote everyone to panelists. Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Sure. So we know, so just if you're, you know, as a part of our discussion, you can, the committee members will be part of the main discussion, but we want to open it up obviously to everyone. So. Okay, so while we're doing that, I'll just introduce Dan Wiley. I will, just to get started, this is we're the Economic, Waterfront, Community Development and Housing Committee. Ariel Krasnow, Housing Chair. Velasquez is our Economic Chair, and I see Mark James was trying to sneak in as an attendee, but he's now going to be promoted to being a panelist. And we're all here to, we welcome Dan Wiley, who is the District Director for Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez, and he's going to present us this evening a bill that she has submitted in Congress for emergency capital improvements to the public housing. I guess the Public Housing Capital Fund is the proper language for it, but you can present it, and then
Be stepping on that.
okay, anybody who we've let in, you have to make sure to mute yourself.
Empty contents.
All right.
Okay.
So basically, we have a bill. Well, Congresswoman Velasquez has reintroduced a bill. She introduced it last Congress. That was 116th Congress. We're now at the 117th Congress. So she's reintroduced her Public Housing Capital Fund bill to basically fund it with $70 billion, which is the physical needs assessment that all the public housing authorities across the country.
Sorry, can we, Samara, can you just mute everyone? Is that possible?
Dan, is that on your side or is that someone else?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to mute my family. Hey, Sam.
Never mind, Dan. Okay.
Great. I had the opposite effect. So the bill is rather simple because, as you know, NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority, has a backlog of capital needs to fix its infrastructure, public housing, all kinds of repairs, as you know. As Red Hook, for instance, has had rolling gas outages, for instance, because the risers need to be replaced that feeds the gas into the buildings. The FEMA, you know, we have one of the largest FEMA disaster awards to public housing in New York City. And so $500 million is going to Red Hook to build back stronger in terms of how it gets power, electric, heat, those systems that we saw go out after Sandy. However, that doesn't, for instance, and they're lucky, we're unlucky that Red Hook was hit so hard, as well as Gowanus, but we're unlucky in that, hey Sasha, but we're unlucky in that it doesn't cover the interiors of the buildings. So the physical needs assessment is done by all the housing authorities across their portfolio of what is needed to fix and bring the housing to a state of good repair. And the physical needs assessment is to the tune of $70 billion across the country. And a large chunk of that, about half of it, would be the New York City Housing Authority, which is the largest housing authority which in its physical needs assessment, came up with a figure of $32 billion of capital repairs. Some good news is that Elizabeth Warren, the Congresswoman, worked with Elizabeth Warren for her to introduce her bill on the Senate side.
Tell me.
And that bill is, she's reintroducing that bill this week. So that's good for momentum. And another thing is that the infrastructure, the leadership in Congress is going to look to two different legislative initiatives to push forward immediately. One of them is infrastructure and the other is immigration. They'll probably go at the same time. And we have agreement from the chairs on the House side and on the Senate side that the infrastructure bill, which is President Biden's Build Back Better plan, we have to put it into legislative form, that should include full funding for a public housing capital fund as part of that infrastructure bill. So the Congresswoman's bill can have legs actually in getting folded into a larger infrastructure bill, which, we're hopeful that housing will be seen and everyone agrees that housing should be considered part of infrastructure. The bill is supported by the National Alliance of HUD Tenants, Low Income Housing Coalition, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and also the National Alliance of HUD Tenants, the National Association of Housing Redevelopment Officials, National Housing Law Project, Action Center for Race and the Economy, and the list goes on. I think as part of your invite to this meeting, you had a link to a press release for the bill that at the bottom of that, it lists all of the endorsers. And you can also see there's good local support from Community Service Society, which has been a big advocate for public housing, Fifth Avenue Committee, Carol Gardens Association, Red Hook Community Justice Center, Center for Court Innovation, Red Hook Initiative, Resilient Red Hook. We also have local electeds supporting from State Senators Kavanaugh, who has his own housing committee in the Senate, as well as Assemblywoman Joanne Simon and Davila, and also council members. Okay, my son is a big fan of Simon.
Not Simon.
Right, he loves Simon.
I don't like Simon.
Okay, well, no politics here.
I only like Buddy Dough.
Okay, Buddy Dough. He's for Buddy Dough. There's no politics here. And anyway, so we have a lot of good local support, maybe including my son, and the local tenant association presidents locally in Community Board 6, Ed Tyree of Gowanus Houses, William Marshall, and Francis Brown from Red Hook West and Red Hook East, respectively, as well as Joanne Brown from Warren Street Houses and Valerie Bell from Wyckoff Gardens. So that's what the bill is in a nutshell.
Can you just explain if this, you mentioned that there's going to be a larger infrastructure bill? Would that impact, that's coming down the pike, does this actual bill get to become part of that bill, or would people just not?
Well, that's the hope, is we can find a vehicle. Often when you introduce legislation, you can try to get the legislation passed as a standalone, but sometimes the way something can really move is that it can be incorporated into a larger package. And so the infrastructure package, just like, your committee, you have a housing, but you part of the package of your committee is waterfront, economic development, community development, right? So you guys are kind of like a big package too.
But is it helpful to have this be out there, even if it doesn't get, you know, even if it doesn't make its way
I
through,
like Buddy
to be out there
Buddy
and having been submitted and under review? Is that helpful to getting it into the pack, you know, into the larger packet, or
Yes,
is
it's
that just a
helpful.
way?
It's
That's
helpful because we want to get,
people
we
look
don't, we want to have as much support as possible. And in fact, the Congresswoman was in Red Hook yesterday, and the mayor, you know, she had reached out to the mayor specifically to get a vaccination site for Red Hook because we saw these public housing developments that were getting 4-day pop-up vaccination sites. And so we were able to get a 4-day vaccination site for Red Hook East and West at the senior center. So the mayor was on hand with the Congresswoman yesterday, and we did a roundtable discussion. And the Congresswoman brought up this point to have the mayor see what he could do in terms of organizing like his National Council of Mayors to put some weight behind this, to say this is something we really need to see, and the fact that this infrastructure bill, you know, can make it more possible. But yeah, basically we want to have, now, you know, the important thing about this bill is it's based on physical needs, which is really going to help New York because it's the largest public housing development. So having it based on physical needs is really key. And so supporting her bill basically does that for a larger, you know, incorporating that into a larger package, as opposed to say just formula where it's just based on population, and that's not, you know, that's not really going to give New York what it needs.
right, right. Okay, I have more questions, but Karen has her hand up, so I'll let Karen ask a question.
I had actually put it in the chat, but
Oh, there you go. Okay, so
is this bill the same as AOC's Green New Deal for public housing, or is this different? Also, is it the same bill as the one that the Congresswoman from California was proposing for public housing? Or are these three separate bills? That's one. Number two, I did send a question in. Ariel, did you see the one that I sent via email?
no, I did not.
So my other question was, how do we support a $70 billion bill without having anybody from public housing on the Congresswoman's payroll? I don't feel that having, I'm sorry, I know I've known you for a long time, Dan, and I know Melissa, but with all of the big things happening around this country, we need some special attention to public housing in Nydia's district, specifically in Red Hook and Gowanus. And so, especially with all of the construction and environmental issues laying all around and being turned up in this community. And I know I was there a year ago supporting the Congresswoman's bill, but I've yet to see you guys actually hire someone from public housing who can actually push that bill along in regards to an organizer like myself. And I'm not advocating for you to hire me, but I'm saying that I don't feel that Red Hook gets as much attention as it should in public housing. And public housing is not such a good deal when you're paying $1,200, $1,500, $1,800 a month rent. And we look at the formula, it goes up $100 a month up until you hit the 80% of fair market, which is a moving target. So at this point, I want to know, why haven't you guys hired someone from public housing? And if the bill is the same as AOC's or the Congresswoman in California's. Thank you.
So it's not the same. In fact, her bill has been around, I think, before AOC's, but basically AOC's is very focused on Green New Deal for public housing. So it's kind of focused on the energy efficiency and those kinds of things. Congresswoman's bill is really focused on meeting the physical needs of public housing, and also giving flexibility for housing authorities to be able to spend that money as they most need to do it, and based on physical needs. So it is different. It's also different than the chair's bill, which has been around for a long time, and hers is kind of across the board, funding 202, Section 8, 211. So it's kind of like an across the board thing, but the Congresswoman's bill is very focused specifically on public housing. We do have a housing coordinator who is a tenant organizer for, more than 2 decades. And she is a project-based Section 8 tenant.
Who is that?
Melissa Del Valle Ortiz.
Right, but Melissa got her hands full
So-
in Sunset, and it's really
So
not-
let me finish.
I know, but I just want to make it clear that it's still not fair. I don't like the way we have to almost kind of like compete for attention in public.
But it's
housing.
not, okay, so let me just continue. So it's not competing for attention. In fact, she's been working very hand in hand with public housing, tenant associations, and groups across the board. And we've brought a lot of attention, and we've taken the lead in getting attention and getting help in Red Hook. So, we've had the public safety meetings that she helped coordinate. We did it with the rise of shootings, which brought PSA 1 and the commanders from the police precincts together practically Christmas Eve with the shootings increase. And then we had another follow-up. And then in March, we're having another community safety roundtable, broadening to more groups to address safety issues. We've had myriad things. And just recently, we brought the mayor to Red Hook to bring a vaccination site at our insistence that we have a vaccination site in Red Hook. And that you might be aware that the vaccination sites that have been popping up around the city in public housing, specifically for housing residents, have pretty much only been for public housing developments that had solely senior-only buildings. Red Hook doesn't have any buildings that are only dedicated to seniors, but the Congresswoman personally called the mayor and insisted that we bring the vaccination site to Red Hook, which happened this past 4 days. And that was thanks to our advocacy. So I don't think anybody can say that we haven't been very focused. So regardless of if we're hiring,
Dan,
because this is about a bill. This isn't talking about who we're hiring right now.
Dan, you're getting too defensive and you should stop. Stop. We know each other too long for this, Dan.
No, but I'm just telling you, what we've done.
I want to just end by saying this. Everything you said is accurate. Yes.
Thank you. Good.
Dealing with policing, shootings, this and that, but that has nothing to do with infrastructure or policies that are being shoved down our throats in public housing. So again, it's too broad. There's too many big ticket items like immigration, affordable housing versus low income housing versus Blackness and everything else for you to tell me that Ms. Melissa can catch all of this effectively. It's not working.
It's not just her, it's me and her. We're all working together. It's not
working anymore. Whatever it is not working, and we want somebody from public housing.
Okay, I hear you. But I'm just telling you also that don't have the impression that we're only working on safety or we're only working on, we're also working on infrastructure issues. We've had myriad meetings on, infrastructure. I can't, you've been to all the meetings, all the stuff that we put together on Sandy, resiliency, rebuilding. And you're at all the meetings that we've done. So
right, I'm at the meetings because I work for
and also
and I spend my own time at those meetings. But what I'm saying to you is
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
Own liaison.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. But another thing to know is that we have Melissa, and this is Southwest Brooklyn. So I'm district director for Southwest Brooklyn. We have Lower East Side. So we actually do have public housing resident staff in our Lower East Side office who lives in public housing on the Lower East Side. And so we have a Lower East Side office as well. And we have 2 staffers over there. So so the Congresswoman actually does have public housing resident staff. So we have Iris Quinones, who's on the Lower East Side. We also got the Lower East Side to do a CAG, which is for the East Side Coastal Resiliency. And that's all the public housing up and down the East River on the East Side. We also have Evelyn Cruz is my counterpart, who's the district director for North Brooklyn and Queens. And so we also have Bushwick, and we have Evelyn is a longtime housing organizer. And then she also has community liaisons that cover going out to Bushwick and Woodhaven, Queens. So, just to have the idea that our district is pretty big. So we do have a very diverse staff that covers a lot of areas. So just to be clear, I mean, I love you, Karen, and I would love nothing more than to have more staff. But we also do have budget constraints on the office, and we have 2 district offices, and we've got plenty of staff scattered between 3 boroughs. So if I had the purse, I'd be hiring more people for my area. But just to be clear, also, point of fact is she does have public housing resident staff.
Thank you, Karen. Are there any other members of the committee first that have questions that they'd like to
have a
raise?
question. I have a question, Ariel.
Sure.
Dan,
Yeah, hey, Karen. I got all the Karens tonight.
how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. I have a question. From a committee standpoint, why would we support this bill? My question is, I'm all for policy and for bills, but the problem is with NYCHA is that a lot of money is given and then the residents and no one sees the results. Where in that bill, I mean, it's been, there's been meetings with HUD trying to regulate how NYCHA uses money. My question is how, or in that bill, is there some kind of language that would designate how it's spent, how it would be overseen? Would HUD play a role in designating how they get it? Would it be done just one full swoop, or would there be layers to it? Because there's always been money given to NYCHA.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, the Congresswoman is on the housing
You're right.
subcommittee.
After decade.
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said the problems remain the same, even though lots.
Yeah, so there's 2 things. Agreed that there needs to be better oversight on how the money is spent. The fact is, though, that we do know that but also you got to have money to misspend as well. And we don't want to misspend money, but she's on the housing subcommittee. So that has an oversight role. And now that we have I think a good administration, I think we can get more proactive on that as well. But the fact is, regardless of what's been mismanaged, there's also a double whammy of you have deficit and mismanagement. You don't have, you have the state that's walked away from its responsibility. You have the city that's not ponying up enough to fill the federal shortfall. So the key also is to get resources that we can have spent better. So the fact is that we know, the risers, as you know, in public housing is 80 years old in Red Hook. So that infrastructure, needs to be upgraded. And regardless of how we improve NYCHA's efficiency or how it operates, which does fall to City Council too, of course, because it's the New York City Housing Authority. It has to have resources to be able to do it. So both things have to be true. So I agree. We need both.
Right, but if it's going to be But if it's going to be a bill that is coming from Congress and NYCHA basically is regulated by the federal government,
Yeah,
I'm just afraid that this will just be pouring money once again. And then you have residents that are still living in the same conditions. And then everyone just has a poor outlook and it just goes, you know, all of the efforts are great, but I'm just afraid of I love bills, I love policy, but is everything in there to tie everything in? Like, I'll give you an example. The FEMA money is being spent, but there are no, there's like no prerequisites, like if the contractor knocks out of the gas or electricity, there is no kind of buffer for the residents. They just have to suck it up. You get a hot plate and you're sent on your way. It doesn't matter if you have one person in your house or 10, and they can't afford to keep living like that. And
I agree.
the gas and electric hasn't just started going out. It's been going out for years.
Yeah, and so that's the very point, is that those 80-year-old risers should be replaced, which we brought Vito the general manager in a roundtable discussion yesterday in Red Hook, and the mayor said, well, how much money do we need to deal with the physical innards of the buildings? You know, we have from the Fed, you know, $500 million for those systems that feed the buildings. But what about when the gas comes inside the building and then goes up the riser? Or you put on a new roof with the FEMA money. What about when the water runs down through the building and you have old pipes that are leaking and causing mold? What's the price tag for that? Vito said it's $600 million. So, you know, we would love to have the FEMA money pay for the interior pipes that run through the buildings, but FEMA has certain rules, and FEMA is not allowing the budget for fixing what was inside. So the Sandy damage only deals with the pipes that are running from the outside, and that's why they're creating new power plants and pods to deliver to the buildings. But the interior of the buildings that have 80-year-old pipes that need to be replaced, he put a price tag on it. So this bill, for instance, would give money to be able to handle replacing those pipes that run up the inside of the building that's not covered by FEMA. So that's a little bureaucratic answer in terms of why that is, but it's not just a case of NYCHA is not doing its job. Its hands are tied in terms of the funding that it could spend. And, you know, technically we've done the meetings with Joyce Cinderbrand, who's in charge of the of doing the resiliency work. And the question was raised, well, if your contractor breaks a pipe, well, they fixed the pipe that was in the ground that they touched. But when Keyspan comes out, they're like, okay, well, you fixed this pipe, but now we have to look at all the pipes before we turn back your gas. And hey, we're not going to turn your gas back when you have an 80-year-old pipe. You have to replace that pipe before we're going to turn off your gas. And so what she's saying is, well, the contractor can't be held liable to fix those 80-year-old pipes, because those are 80-year-old pipes that should have been replaced in the first place, which NYCHA hasn't done because it has not had the budget to do it. Now, if you look at Smith houses on the Lower East Side, the councilwoman, Chin, put up $1 million to replace the risers on the inside of the buildings. That was city money, even though there's federal money for resiliency on the outside of Smith houses. The inside of Smith houses, they needed to come up with local money to fix those interior risers. So she came up with $1 million, but guess what? The price tag was $2 million. So then the governor, actually the governor could do something too here. The mayor, or at least NYCHA, then put up. Oh no, no.
Donald Trump.
No. No, he's not. Okay, this is not good. I gotta go on mute now. You know what? Rebellious kids, they like to say.
Very disrespectful.
Okay, so So, so my point is that in Red Hook, the price tag for replacing the risers in 2017 was assessed at, I think, 7 million, which I think today would be more like 10 million. And so I know Councilman Carlos Menchaca's office is looking at, well, what could we do with our discretionary money to kick in some of that now, and then see what could be matched maybe by state and NYCHA to do the other part, so we could proactively be replacing the risers instead of waiting for an emergency and then have people go 3 months without cooking gas. So.
Okay. But
So I'm saying, you know, we need to get some funds into the place, and we should be so lucky then to, you know, then deal with making sure it's spent the right, you know, properly. We need to have some funding to actually replace these systems, and we welcome the local government and state government to kick in what it needs now urgently, while we're working on this bigger picture in DC. And so I
with
think everybody should
this
be
bill, but does this bill on its own not, will it not be able to do something substantial? That's my question. Would we support this bill? What is it actually going to do without supports from other entities?
Oh, well, no, but to be clear, this bill would fully fund what NYCHA says it needs, is physical needs assessment. So it would fully fund what NYCHA says it needs. If we had this bill, we wouldn't need RAD, and we wouldn't need local, you know, as much local ponying up money. If we were able to get what the Congresswoman wants in this bill, this would cover the price tag of what NYCHA says in its official physical needs assessment, which all the local housing authorities across the country had to put into HUD. What money do you need? They had to put that in, and this would basically fully fund what they said they needed. I'm not saying you won't ever need local money, but pretty much a lion's share would be covered, because this covers what the local need NYCHA says it needs, and all the public housing authorities say they need, you know, across the country.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I think we're going to come back to Karen's point about the flow of that money, but let's Alec and Rick have their hands up. I think Alec's hand was up. Alec?
Thank you, and thanks, Dan, for coming here.
Yeah, sure.
So, you know, my question really is following up on Karen's, well, the last Karen to speak, her question, and it really is about how to ensure that this money is going to go as far as it should go, right? Like $40 billion is a lot of money, and this would be a godsend. I mean, I think everybody knows that NYCHA is in a really bad position, and that we're essentially giving up on NYCHA if we do not put in substantial federal money. And the primary reason why NYCHA has declined in the physical built environment over the last few decades is because the federal government has not met its responsibilities. So this is, I don't mean to in any way diminish just how significant and important the funding itself is. But you know, I think we really need to think about whether NYCHA is, as currently structured, without additional strings attached and structures put in place, prepared to spend this money wisely and quickly to really do the work, right? Because we see every year that goes by, the capital needs just magnify if they're not addressed immediately. One thing I'd urge you to look at, if you haven't already, if it's not in the bill, is that the Regional Plan Association put together a report that suggested maybe putting together a separate authority, a little bit like the School Construction Authority in the New York City environment, to handle capital spending and procurement for NYCHA. So it would be sort of like a NYCHA capital authority. And RPA put together a really, I thought, look, I'm not an expert in this matter, but put together a pretty smart report detailing why that might be a good idea. And I think all of us who've had experience with NYCHA and know how they can sit on money for a really long time, even after it's allocated, because of their pretty Byzantine procurement rules, it could be a good idea. And the second thing I wanted to bring up is that I wanted to ask whether this bill is addressing just capital or whether it also is addressing some of the ongoing capacity needs and ongoing funding needs for NYCHA, because I think in my observation reading on this subject too, one problem is that NYCHA, you can give them a pot of money, but unless they have the institutional capacity inside NYCHA to actually move that money along and spend it well, then it's not going to be as effective as it could be. So I think, NYCHA needs more ongoing support. It's sort of like soft, not just hard dollars or whatever lingo you want to use. So those are 2 points. And Dan, thank you very much again. I think you're on mute, Dan.
Thanks. So I think it's an interesting point on school construction authority. I don't think this bill can do all of that. But to the second point you have, I think that if we bring the resources that NYCHA has, that's going to help it much more meet its institutional capabilities, hire more people and stuff, because it wouldn't have to rob from Peter to pay Paul, internally. That said, I think the authority and the way it's structured is a local matter, and this bill is like a national bill to help public housing authorities, that are stretched to their limits and have this shortfall in bringing their building stock up to par, is a national. So it's like we couldn't have in a bill, one size fits all to tell all housing authorities how they should be structured. But I would point to the mayor, and the next mayor would be the place where you need to restructure NYCHA. So that definitely is a mayoral city council type reform that we couldn't legislate one size fits all across all the housing authorities. But certainly it's a good idea to look at that.
I don't mean to, I totally hear you. And it may be that politically, it's just too difficult to handle that structural issue, because there are all kinds of ideas on the table about how NYCHA should be restructured, and maybe that should be handled locally. And I don't know the politics at all. But I guess I would just push back a little bit in that this could be a rare moment of this huge federal intervention, again, taking public housing seriously. And it might be an opportunity then to, to tackle some of these structural problems, because there's a way in which sometimes writing a big check can make people ignore some festering problems, as if, now that we're flush with cash, they don't need to be addressed.
Right. I'll definitely take that back. And, I'll definitely take that back. But, yeah, no, I just went blank. Well, maybe it'll come back to me. I mean, the school, I know what I was going to say. Look at what, in terms of reform, now, notice, you have this thing called RAD, right? So RAD, which is a pilot that the city currently wants to do because it's trying to figure out how to raise money. The Public Housing Authority, Section 9 versus Section 8, public housing can't borrow money. So most people, with a house can get a construction loan to fix and finance the upgrades they need to do. Public housing in Section 9 does not allow the borrowing of money. So notice that with NYCHA, for instance, some of the ideas of operating differently is coming up with this pilot program to make it Section 8 and make more flexibility on the money so it can actually borrow money, bring in private developers, blah, 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 right? So there's one can of worms that's like a reform. So I'm just saying that this is something counter to that. This is something that would give you something like, let's say you do reform how NYCHA spends money. And I still think that's something we can focus on. You know, let's give it resources to have a better body spend money, as opposed to abdicate its role to, you know, like the private sector. But, you know, it's an ongoing thing. So the oversight rule of the housing subcommittee, which does have the power of the purse, and, you know, what Congress has is the power of purse, and the executive branch has the administrative side. So we have to work with the Biden administration on the kind of reforms you're talking about as well, in terms of how things are administered. So we try to bring the funds and the resources, work with the administration to actually run things better. I think we'll have a much better chance at that in this administration than the last.
Thank you. Rick?
Hi, these are phenomenal questions. So my question is sort of more strategic and political. One is trying to win over the members of Congress who are not urban and not New York centric when you're talking about a huge percentage of the funds going to New York, and obviously we want it, but I just wonder what political obstacles that sets up. And two, if within the infrastructure bill, which is not just around sort of capital, but is around jobs and the economy. So the question is, can these funds be deployed for employment purposes at the local level? Can there be some strings attached that are around employment mandates? And can you quantify that so that this becomes an economic argument in addition to a human rights and health and justice argument?
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll start with the last one. You know, the Congressman also has separate bills to strengthen Section 3, and to Karen Blondell's point, to hire locally. With any federal money, you do have Section 3 that does put targets on local hiring for the demographic. So she also has legislation to beef up Section 3. And on the political side, the good news I was mentioning is that, you know, Elizabeth Warren is introducing the bill on the Senate side this week, probably midweek. She's going to come out with a press release. Patty Murray in Washington State and Cory Booker in New Jersey are co-sponsors of that bill. There are public housing, you know, authorities across the country. So yes, they may be more urban, not, you know, or close to urban or ex-urban. So, you know, there is a little bit in a lot of different districts. So I think that's a good thing. It is a push though, and we have to use as much influence as we can to emphasize the importance of public housing, because you're right, not everybody is going to be gung-ho about putting infrastructure money into public housing as, quote, infrastructure. And that's why I stated at the outset that it was important that we have the chairs of, you know, the financial services committee, Maxine Waters. So she's supportive, as well as on the Senate side, you know, banking and urban affairs, housing and urban affairs. So you've got those two chairs that are behind it. And we just have to, you know, infrastructure, you know, realize when you talk infrastructure, a lot of that, and think of the bills, like the highway bills, the TLU bills, they tend to pour money into highways that, you know, are not urban. So, you know, I think it's a balancing act, but I think you'll see a lot of money also goes to places that aren't urban, by dint of so much of the country is highways and other things. And I think, we're trying to get our fair share for urban areas that have seen this blight in getting housing considered. And you could think of that as a progressive kind of thing, like a progressive tax, to get resources to where a lot of people are suffering.
Thank you.
Jackie Painter? You're-
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Hey, Dan. First, I'd definitely like to voice my support in all of the great questions asked already tonight. I agree with my neighbors who have spoke about wanting to see a breakdown of these funds to make sure that they're going to our communities and to our NYCHA houses here that need a lot of support. And I definitely would like to see a plan for the future added to this bill, or at least like to hear what more of what the Congresswoman's office thinks for going into the future for these repairs, how she is going to hold NYCHA accountable and the repairs accountable for everything that we just said. But I definitely think this is like the necessary first step. I'm so glad to see a true bill in Congress about fully funding NYCHA. The first step is always the money. And my questions for you are it's a two-part question. One is, what is the timeline on this bill? I think it's just important for everyone to know like where this bill sits right now, and just a breakdown for everybody if you don't know. And then what kind of community support would the office be looking for? And does the office have any plans for more community education for this bill?
So timeline is, bills, you introduce bills, they could either languish and just sit around, or they could move around. So I'm not, there's a lot of moving parts here. I think the reason I'm talking about the infrastructure bill is because in terms of timeline, that and immigration nationally, I think are two key, topics that are going to be moved on first. And so that's why we're trying to get the housing, get on that train so we can move it earlier than just waiting around for someone just to pass it standalone. So that's the timing part. Your second question was community support. Well, what we're looking for, there's a link to the press release that lists supporters, and I think we have a good cross section of supporters. You can look at that. That link, I can put it in the chat, but it was in the linked on the email that Mike Rasiopo sent.
It's in the chat. I don't know if people didn't get it. I can put it in the chat again.
Great. So you see at the bottom of the press release, you'll see quotes, and you see Ms. Brown, for instance, is quoted in the release from Red Hook East Tenant Association president. You got a lot of different people quoted, and you'll see all the groups that are listed that I rattled off at the beginning. I say if there are any more groups that you have that aren't on the list, just shoot me an email, me or Melissa or anyone in our office. We can add them on. We'd love to have the support of the community board as well. So if the committee supports it, and feel free, I will take back the question about oversight and how money is spent, and thinking about the future of making sure that it isn't mismanaged. Also, the Congresswoman's keen on having community voice influencing how money is spent, and priorities. So I think that's a good point, and I think that's something that should happen on the local level, regardless, in terms of prioritizing, what's most important. So yeah, I would say, let us know if there's any other groups, and I would also say that, just communicating to local leadership, that this, this is something we want to move. The big picture is New York could get shortchanged if there was a broader bill that only funded housing on a formula based on pure population numbers, which would not reflect the outsized need that is where there's big clusters of public housing. So this bill would direct money more to where it's needed as opposed to just spreading it all over the place, regardless of, the ratio of housing to population.
Dan, is there going to be any kind of, did your office do any kind of like conversations with residents, Red Hook, because it's the second largest development in New York City, as to if a bill like this is done, what are the thoughts of the residents as far as repairs, or just their thoughts, so that when this bill is actually placed or that, there is some community voices behind it. You've got, in Red Hook, you got TA leaders, but you got residents that have lived there for over 50 years. I mean, people can tell you when it walked in, what it used to look like. I mean, when these bills are written, the best thing to do is to always get that community back voice. Is that going to be done, or has that been done? Because Red Hook is a large place, and you could get, as you know, for many years before you even work with Nydia, there's a lot of different voices with opinions that you could get.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually we can do a forum. She introduced this bill last year, and we did have input. And we, even with RHI, I remember years ago, I brought up the bill and discussion we had when we met at PAVE Academy. I don't know if you remember the meeting at PAVE Academy. And then there was these gas issues and all these other issues, mold, a lot of things that RHI raised in a white paper that it did. And so I brought the bill to the PAVE years ago to get input and let people know about it. We can do more of that, absolutely. Even just to educate the community about what's going on in terms of advocacy going forward. So we'd love to do that more.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, like, we introduced the bill the last Congress, and even we're talking about it and having it before that. So it's been a kind of an iterative process.
Right, but as far as like our committees and stuff, we always, when we're considering supporting stuff, the main thing that we always toss around the room is how much community input was used in going forward with what's done. And when we go and speak to the community and that's not what we're getting, then it's going to be really hard to support. Not saying that we won't, but that's
right.
what we look for, is the
right.
community, just their voices being heard.
Right. But also I would say that we have staff, myself included, for 20 years, I've been going to TA meetings and RHI meetings and however many meetings you want to say. So we're also kind of very embedded in the conversation ongoing, going every month to tenant association meetings, for instance, but not just tenant association meetings. And that includes, Lower East Side, North Brooklyn, Southwest Brooklyn. So, it's kind of not just like we have one-off, but we can also do some of those too. But I'm just saying we don't just have one-offs, but we just have constant, going to all the meetings. Now, I do notice a drop off. We haven't seen tenant association meetings happening since COVID. So that is something that's lacking right now, that, our office has offered to give support for the Zoom format, to have tenant associations do a Zoom format meeting. So we're more than happy to find a venue to get into this in more detail, like you're saying, particularly now during the pandemic.
Right. Okay.
Let me just
That's a
say,
good idea.
Jan, that there's been no meetings in Red Hook, but conversations around RAD and the conversation we're having now is still going on without any resident input. And so until you can produce minutes to all of those meetings that you attended with the tenant association, it doesn't count because they don't take minutes and there is no conversations because I be in those meetings. There's no
I know.
conversation. So
Yeah.
if you know that the rule says Robert Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure is supposed to be in place and it's not, then we just wasted 10, 15 years meeting in the Red Hook houses because nothing, absolutely nothing outside of dogs is ever discussed. Nothing. Nothing. We asked about the trees and the sprinklers that were took out for this construction. And we asked about it for 2 whole years. In February, right before the pandemic closed everything down, we heard from the contractor that those sprinklers will not be returning to the Red Hook houses. So now we've been a year without the pool because that's being used as a testing site. When if it's going to be a testing site, it should be a vaccine site too. Common sense here. But so we don't have that. We don't have sprinklers, but we have increased 90-degree and above days every single year. And it's almost intolerable to walk outside in the summertime in Red Hook with the construction, with the lack of 500 trees that were cut down and with no watering stations. So I'm very irate and I want some action out here in Red Hook for this community to survive. It's not even just about the infrastructure, it's about survival now at this point.
Thanks, Karen. I have a few questions actually, and one of them is related to this question about the capital funds versus the sort of the cost to enact them, which is also the issue of how these funds are going to be enacted. And I think Karen Blondell was just hitting on the lack of communication, and in the 7 years I've been on the board, at least 2 or 3 times we have put out letters to NYCHA on behalf of NYCHA residents from meetings we've had with them, and I don't believe we've ever had a response. But that's just obviously that's a very small amount of community board meetings that have resulted in that, not counting all of the meetings that are going on consistently. So that's I guess that gets back to this question of without the right systems in place at NYCHA, which means better communication, better response. The question is, how do we, in terms of our support for a bill like this, because so much of it would be coming to New York, and I would think if any other congressperson voting on it would want to have some assurances of that, what we could do, and possibly just in our letter of support to ensure that some requirements, or that we, as a couple of people have mentioned, that we use this as leverage to try to make some systemic changes from our perspective. I mean, that's not that's not the federal government's role. That's going to be New York City's role. So that's one question. The other question I have is that the NYCHA Preservation Trust, which is that idea from RPA, and I think Community Service Society has also done a lot of work on this, and when they look at this, they pull out the funding that's already gone to RAD, and their numbers are different. So I'm just wondering, RAD is already sort of underway. Are your numbers accounting for that? Is that something that's going to come back, or is that just sort of part of the as you massage this thing down the road, things change, or what would be the actual connection to that?
Okay, so, and also going back to Karen Blondell's point about transparency and RAD, the Congresswoman is not a proponent of RAD, and in fact, this bill is an alternative to RAD. And then to your point, RAD, is spotty, right? And we've got some developments in our district, in Williamsburg and elsewhere, that are going the direction of RAD. But the physical needs assessment that NYCHA did was in 2017. It's across the board. All the public housing authorities had to do their PNAs, they're called, physical needs assessments, in 2017. The price tag has actually gone up. But to do apples to apples, the last time that HUD has a report from all the public housing authorities, what is your capital need right now for physical repairs? And it was $70 billion. Now it's probably $75 billion. So it's actually gone up. So even with RAD, the repair cost is likely gone up. So it'd probably be a wash, but I can, that's kind of like in the weeds question. I can review with our ledge people, how that would be figured out.
And what about the question that has come up multiple times? Does a bill like this, I know you said it's a national bill, so we can't say how much of that's going to be directed to our district, or, there's certain things we can't do. But in terms of accountability, is there any role in that?
Actually, in the whole process, we could come up, and this is good, we can come up with an amendment that could be attached to it. So like this bill is KISS, keep it simple, which is give the money that public housing needs to at least be able to bring its physical plant up to par. We can have amendments and stuff that we could do. So let me circle back with Rick Arkell, who's he's on Financial Services Housing Subcommittee, who's the expert on the bills and what we have being introduced, to see what we could do in that regard. So that could be an amendment, just like if you do a resolution and then you have a something you're attaching to it, that could be a friendly amendment. And then that could be something that, if it is part of something larger, big bills will take pieces of legislation from different places and then wrap them together. So it could be another bill, it could be an amendment to it. So, everything is on the table when it comes to coming up with legislation. And happy to have, another meeting and focus group that we can do with all of you stakeholders and residents to discuss those ideas, and we could do some research behind, what's been out there so far in terms of reform.
Thanks.
I would say that you need a horse, you need water to lead the horse too. True, you can't make him drink or her drink, but if you have no water, there's nothing to lead the horse to anyway. So what are you going to do?
There are some people posting.
Sorry for the horse analogy. I don't mean to offend any equine folks.
Are there anyone else who wants to raise their hand and ask directly? I know there's a lot going on in the chat, but I'm not able to multitask enough to pull them out. Does somebody else want to raise their hand and ask a question directly? Don't see any. So since this, we are still in our committee meeting, I think the next step would be for us to determine if we want to prepare I guess it would be a letter of support. I'm not sure if it's a resolution or a letter of support. Need help from my co-chairs on this, to submit along with this. And I just was wondering if the timing of that matters at all. Is that something that we should get in before it goes into the Senate, like in a week, which I don't think, I mean, it has to get approved by the full board, but does it impact at all when a letter of support were to be submitted?
I guess two things. One is, maybe having general support in name, like the community board votes to support the bill. That could be early. But you want to have something where you're specifying things that you want to see in addition and all that. It could take some time. I think there's time. I'll circle back with Rick on the housing subcommittee in terms of timing. But I would say that it's not like you're going to get it passed by the whole until you have your next general meeting anyway. And the bill is being introduced by Elizabeth Warren in the Senate mid this week. So we've already put out a press release and listed supporters. It's pretty long already. So I just said the more the merrier, and whenever you want to come on board is great. And also don't feel like you have to do a whole letter, but it sounds like you guys have enough ideas. Maybe what I could do is bring back some of these ideas that are very good, that you've raised. Karen Broughton and Karen Blondell, so the two Karens, and Rick, and then give you some feedback on what we might be able to do in case that's helpful. But more info is better, and if you put something in writing, it's less writing that I have to try to extrapolate.
We'll craft something very detailed, I'm sure. Okay, two more quick questions. I think Carolyn Fortune was up first.
Yes, my name is Carolyn Fortune. Good evening, everyone. I have two questions. First one, Dan, I just wanted to clarify something. Are you saying that there will be subcommittees in terms of accountability and sort of a watchdog over this bill? And the second question is, Nydia Velasquez, why is it that there's meetings that go on in Wyckoff and Gowanus, and there's nothing that goes on in Red Hook? And we have the largest, I think we're the second or third largest complex within the New York City area.
You mean like tenant association meetings? Or what do you mean by meetings?
You had mentioned accountability in terms of like a watchdog, in terms of the money, the funds that's being brought within the bill itself. And I think you had mentioned something about having subcommittees in order to for the accountability part of it.
Well, accountability is something that has to happen just by dint of our following what's happening with money. And with the local, with the mayor, it has to also be at the city council and mayor's office, and also Brian Kavanaugh, who's in the state senate. We're all part of the Alliance to Preserve Public Housing as well. That's met regularly with Community Service Society and Legal Aid Society, as well as local advocacy groups. So I think that's like, multi-pronged oversight. And then, the housing subcommittee can have hearings as well in oversight. So that's something that's like ongoing. And in terms of, we've pulled together and we've organized a number of meetings to talk about the issues with how the Sandy money is being spent, and the scope, we've convened meetings where Karen Blondell has brought up the trees and sprinkler issue, and I know that Joyce Cinderbrand talked about trying to get more trees in this area than others, and trying to preserve as many trees as possible, and how many trees were taken out by saltwater because London plane tree is susceptible to salt water and dies from it. So we've held special meetings even in the context of not having the regular TA meetings happen that we've actually organized ourselves. So, what I'm saying is we can do more of that. But the bill itself isn't, I'm not saying that the bill has a watchdog clause to it. But what I am saying is I'm going to come back to DC and see, well, you know, is there anything that we could attach to it in a larger package? But the bill is pretty simple in terms of just trying to bring resources that's lacking in housing authorities.
I also, I'm sorry, I had a second question in terms of Lydia Velasquez. As I stated earlier, Red Hook is, I believe, the second or largest complex of NYCHA that exists in New York City.
Right.
And I'm wondering, why is it that they're well, of course, with COVID, we're not able to do that because of the social distancing, and I understand that. But why aren't we having more meetings in terms of her within our community?
Well, for instance, we've had a large Zoom meeting with her and the NYCHA chair, and she brought the NYCHA chair to Red Hook to address these Sandy resiliency questions and others. So we've done that before COVID. We did that at the Mickey-O down in the cafeteria, for instance, the last one I remember, and then we did it again by Zoom, where we brought the chair back a number of months ago with, you know, his whole team on the Sandy reconstruction. So I don't know if you attended that one, but we have had the Congresswoman herself in a meeting bringing the NYCHA chair to Red Hook.
That one I was not able to attend. No, I was not.
Okay, so that was one that we did just last year. So, I mean, I have to look up the exact date. I can send you info. I can make sure that, you know, maybe I can get your email, so I'm sure that I include you, you know, when we organize the next one.
Right, and I heard a lot of people within the community didn't even know about that meeting that had taken place as well.
Yeah, and it's always, you know, we try to get the word out as best we can. So, you know, we have to work with everybody. I think there was flyering and emails, and not everybody gets emails. And I know in this last time when the congressman insisted the mayor bring vaccinations to the Red Hook public housing site. And by the way, it's coming to Gowanus next. So Red Hook was first. So the congresswoman's point to the mayor is that Red Hook is divided into Red Hook East and Red Hook West. If it were not divided into Red Hook East and West, it'd be the largest public housing in the city. But because it's divided into East and West, then it doesn't sound like the largest. So Queensbridge gets that. If you split Queensbridge in half, then you wouldn't say it's the largest, right? So her argument was precisely what you're saying, is that Red Hook is the largest. Therefore, you need to bring a vaccination site now to Red Hook, not wait and only be letting it pop up, you know, where you have senior housing only in public housing, because we have over 1,000
I'm going
seniors.
to interrupt you. Will they be back within the Red Hook community, or is this just for one time?
Well, they're going to come back in 28 days.
Okay.
Well, that's to administer the second shot.
But I mean, for further first doses, will they be coming back into the community?
Yeah. So here's the thing. So we had to leverage as much as we could. So we could get 400 shots. I have to get what the final number is. But we were able to get 400 shots, which isn't all of the seniors in Red Hook, right? But because supply has been slow in coming down, we're trying to increase supply. And you see with the Biden administration, we're actually increasing supply more. And now there's Medgar Evers. And soon people within all the zip codes of Brooklyn next week will be able to go to Medgar Evers, because there's a special supply that's going directly from the Fed to Medgar Evers for Brooklyn, and another one at York College for Queens. So we were able to get this 4-day site in Red Hook, and it's going to come back to give the second shot. But it's now going this week, starting Thursday. It's going to be in Gowanus. Also, actually, if you're a public housing resident as a senior, you know, they're not going to turn you away if you go to Gowanus, if you go to Wyckoff Community Center or Gowanus Senior Center, and you're able to sign up.
And is all this information, publicly available? I'm sure it is. That maybe we could send it out, and so everyone can.
Well, here's the thing. So
this information.
So the thing about the vaccination
Dan,
site
it's
in
only
Red Hook,
it's by appointment only. Do not
Right.
send people. It's by appointment only, health and hospitals.
and the
And the
thing
flyer
is,
said from Friday to Sunday, but it was actually from
Okay,
Thursday, and a lot of residents didn't know that.
So,
Yeah, so-
I just want to bring it's getting close to 8, and I just want to bring the meeting back a little bit. Maybe you want to finish up, Dan, on the
well,
the
let me
vaccination,
let me
which
just
is
make
really
the
important.
yeah.
But
Let
we
me
can
just make the
also put
right.
that out there for people.
I just have to say that
Sure.
we're not gonna we can't put the NYCHA vaccination pop-up sites on social media or broad public distribution, because you get people from outside coming in, and the target is people in public housing that are seniors, right? So if you want the seniors in the public housing to get it, you're not going to blast this out all over Park Slope. And that's that's why there was flyering in all the buildings and a concerted local communication, as opposed to something that you can just find on a general city website. And then someone's going to come in from Westchester County with a
So,
poodle.
Dan, we might want to have you back. One of those suggestions that had actually come up in our list of committee meetings to have during this next, coming up year was actually to focus on Red Hook houses, and that's something we would like to do, and we're happy to sort of plan for that. And these are, there's a question here about Red Hook housing not having a senior building. There's very specific elements to making something a senior housing. So I think there are a lot of questions have come up about Red Hook, and I'd be very happy to do that. We would, plan for that. Maybe this panel would have you back if you'd like, and we can continue that. So I just want to say that there's clearly an awful lot of need for more communication there. But I do want to also, there are a couple more hands up, and I want to, figure out what we're going to do in terms of the issue at hand, which is the emergency public housing bill. Mark, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hey, Mark.
Hi, Dan. Listen, I would like to talk when we're ready to do a resolution. If somebody else wants to ask a question first, that's fine with me.
There's one more. Karen, you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that one of my pet peeves are these generic letters of support on behalf of public housing residents. I don't like it. I feel that a lot of times other people are speaking for public housing residents. And again, without having minutes to indicate that these meetings are actually being attended by public housing residents, it's more of a dictatorship and a one-person band that is doing all of the talking. So me, myself, I am an organizer. I do not just randomly sign letters of support. I have to really talk to the people and make sure that I'm supporting what I'm supporting. And I bring that up only because, Dan, you mentioned the Community Service Society, and I like Vic Bach a lot, but he is not the savior or the great white hope for public housing. And Vic Bach sat on the RAD board. So before RAD was implemented in Warren Street houses and other developments across the city, they had a roundtable in 2016, and Community Service Society sat on that board and came up with the RAD playbook. Okay, most of the people who sat in there were not residents. And when I did go, I wasn't welcomed. So that's a big issue. And Community Service Society, again, they do great work. I'm glad they got $100 million a year back from the police department that belonged to NYCHA's capital. For over 10 years, the police department was allowed to take $100 million out of the public housing budget, okay? And that was returned because of pressure from Jesse Jackson and CSS, but That's one thing. I don't care if I did something 20 years ago, that's what I did 20 years ago. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what are you doing now? Right now, he is not aligned. The Community Service Society is not aligned with the residents in regards to the Preservation Trust blueprint or RAD. And it's a damn shame that they were able to set up the rules for RAD, which erases my Black inheritance as a Black descendant of slaves and Indians. I don't have the same protections under RAD or the Preservation Trust that I have under Section 9. It is not the same. They keep saying it's similar, but similar is not the same. What you do and how you can help people who are immigrants or refugees or here for asylum, that's what you do for them. I'm not a refugee. I'm not here on asylum. You know what I'm saying? But this is my country. And so those rules were put in place on a federal level because of civil rights marches and actions. And I will never sit here and let you strip that away from my Black tribe, because everybody Black is not the same and we're not dealing with the same issues. And that's why I said Melissa can't cover everything. She's already covering people of color in Sunset Park who live in affordable housing. I want somebody to cover Black people like myself who are paying $1,200, $1,500, $1,800 a month rent in Red Hook. And if we don't believe me, let's knock door to door and we can ask them what the rents are in Red Hook, okay? We deserve more and better. It's a shame that I went from paying $137 in this apartment on welfare to paying the cap, which was $495, to now being in a situation where I'm paying almost 80% of fair market with no ceiling for the same pipes that I had in here when I walked in here in 1989. That is the racism behind what's going on here. And I'm sick of being quiet about it. So do not sign any support unless we are really supportive, not just of Nydia's thing. We got to really, I want some action, Dan. This is not about just talking and us being there for 10 years advocating for something. I'm almost 60 now. I don't even know if I got 10 years left, especially when the pandemic feel like it put 10 on me in 1 year. We need action. We need action, Dan. I cannot take a bath in this apartment that I've been in since 1989 because sewage is still coming up on the ground floor. When they rezone Gowanus, and I want to just answer one thing, because Robert and them, I work in Gowanus. I see Nydia over there, and she does not come over there more than she comes to Red Hook. You just don't know her schedule. So if you look up a congressperson's schedule, it tells you when they're home, when they're in their home state, what months they come back to where their constituents are. And then you got to do some of the legwork too. You got to seek her out. You know what I'm saying? You know Nydia is around Red Hook. So you could ask Dan, hey, is the Congresswoman home this weekend? And get the conversation going. But don't pit Red Hook against Gowanus, because Gowanus and Wyckoff are not seeing Nydia any more than Red Hook is. Okay? And I work there professionally and I know. Thank you.
And if I could just dovetail, I agree, Karen, with your critique of RAD. And also I'm aware that the Alliance doesn't represent all the housing residents. That's why we don't just go. And actually I stopped going to those Alliance meetings myself.
You don't act like you know it.
No, I do, because I do know it. And the bill that Congresswoman is introducing is an alternative to RAD. It is a way of not having to do RAD. If you have this bill, you don't need RAD because you're bringing the money from the government as opposed to coming up with a scheme to raise it with private developers and this scheme to put it in Section 8 as opposed to Section 9 that Karen's talking about. So this bill actually enables you to keep it in Section 9, which is the exact point that Karen is raising.
Come on, Dan, I think we gotta wrap it up here.
Okay, all right.
And my other boss is telling me it's time to wrap it up.
No, it's 8 o'clock, and so that's fine.
All of my bosses, but I got one right here.
We can let Dan, can we let Dan go? And as we talk, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Dan, and we appreciate your coming by tonight and spending the full hour and a half with us.
And I would just say that, I mean, I think Congresswoman Velasquez is very herself involved in leveraging, bringing resources here to Red Hook and showing up. I mean, she's even shown up when we had water distribution, when we had outages, and she was out here, and we actually stepped forward to help coordinate, get water bottles delivered. So I would just say that, you know, don't leave with the impression that she's not showing up. For a member of Congress who's got to be down in DC and dealing with all these leadership things that she's got to do, it's, you know, it's amazing to me. So I just put that out there.
Thank you very much again. Appreciate it. And we will be getting back to you. I'm sure something will come
Thank
out
you,
of this
Dan.
meeting. I'm quite sure of that.
All
Thank you.
right. Thank you all.
Thank
Good night.
Good night.
Sammy says good night.
Good night to the whole family.
Oh, he's not saying good night. Okay. Good night.
Mark?
Yes, hi. Yeah, I really appreciate the fine grained local issues that have been brought up. I really do. And it's important that we press for those things that we want in terms of making sure the repairs actually get done, making sure that the leaks are actually fixed, rather than money gets poured into the pockets of people who say they're doing the repairs and all that. But nonetheless, I mean, Dan is absolutely right that one of the first steps is to actually get money. And supporting this bill is a method of at least initially getting some money, if it could come through. Getting it as part of a larger infrastructure bill is probably the only way a bill like this even has a chance to come through, basically because of all the issues that he talked about in terms of getting people to distribute the money outside of just the general fund to all the states. So I would recommend first that we do a motion, and the motion is to support the bill. And then we can invite Dan back, and hopefully he'll come back, invite Dan back with regard to those things we'd like to see in terms of amendments or additions or additional bills as we can, and also in terms of what we'd like to see the city do in terms of all those things. But right now, this is about a bill that may or may not go through with an infrastructure bill, and we would like to see go through with an infrastructure bill. And I would like to recommend that the committee pass a motion to support the bill.
I would second that motion.
Great. Thank you. So now is it, now that we have a motion on the floor, is it just committee members, or what's this?
Yes.
It's just committee members.
Everybody else is, you know, welcome to stay on.
You gotta mute everyone.
I can't mute everyone, but I don't think.
Okay. I don't know if in terms of comments, while I would support that, I will only support it if the community board issues a letter that specifies the accountability issues that we talked about.
Absolutely.
There were two ways to do this. I think, you know, Dan had suggested, and I thought Mark was saying that we do just one support, but we do have time.
What I am suggesting is that we do a motion that supports the bill and states that we would like there to be further discussion of the issues with regard to the local community matters that are important to our participants in this panel.
But if
Can we say instead of
this,
this,
but if we support this bill, if we put in a support, we have to also put in whatever the needs that we are asking for, because many times there are a lot of things done when it comes to NYCHA and public housing, and you know, people support bills, they go through, and then it's a whole different story once the money is dispersed. And I'm not gonna support this unless it has amendments that are coming from the left and the right, because I've seen money, I've seen it wasted, and I've seen support that after the fact, there's nothing you can do. The money is there.
So that sounds like what Rick was also saying. Is that correct, Rick? You would need the amendments in place before you would support it. I mean,
Yes, or a commitment that, I mean, you know, if this is separated in terms of the actual bill, I think we as a committee and we as part of the board have to ensure that that language is very specific around around accountability and around the city and around how people are involved in participation on these discussions.
so,
So that's a yes, but.
well, it's a yes, but is the way to do this now is that we have to, you know, prepare this and then can we, which we've done in other meetings, and then circulate it and have people say yes or no and have it ready for the next, for the March general meeting. And then everyone would have a chance to look at it and make their comments if we've made the points about accountability and be very as specific enough to that people are happy with that in terms of part, you know, also I think all of these things of participation from residents are things that I can't imagine wouldn't make this stronger all around. And I think particularly because it's a national bill, but it is rather specific to a few places. I think the more we can be specific about that, I think the stronger it will make the bill in general for people that want to make sure the money is spent. Well, if they care.
But I have a question though. I mean, the motion that's on the floor now that was just seconded, is the motion just to have a general support of the bill? And we're saying that we're going to work out the amendments and the specifics later on? Or are we saying that the motion on the floor will have to be amended so that another motion can be made on the floor where we say support is going to be contingent on an amendment which basically articulates the specific needs folks had raised up in this discussion? I'm not following which one we're voting on.
Oh, sorry about that. I think well, we had the motion on the floor. We've been discussing it, and I believe that the second what you said is, which means we have to make an amendment to this motion, or right, to say that
right
requires all the
right
requires
exactly.
all the conditions that we're going to put on this.
Right, because I think we're looking to make an amendment to the motion on the floor.
Okay, would someone
And
like
then
to?
and then we vote on the amendment to the motion on the floor. Yeah.
Would someone like to make that amendment to the initial motion to support the bill?
I'll make that amendment.
I'll second that.
Okay, so now that was Neil that was asking that question.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
me.
Okay, so now we have a motion with a amendment that it will require amendments before we are.
If I may, now we have to know what those items are that we're adding on.
Exactly.
Rick?
I'm not sure. I look to the group. I think we have to be very specific that there be levels of accountability in the bill.
I would suggest, if I may, that we could, I don't know whether we need to adjudicate right now at this meeting precisely all of the things that we would say, but we could agree generally on the principles, the principles that the letter would say, and something like that we would hope a bill would include measures for accountability and oversight reform to ensure that new funding is spent wisely, that we're mindful of past mismanagement. And the bill should be tailored to ensure that public dollars are not wasted. And I would throw it to, to Karen or others here, if they think we should be naming specific capital needs in
The capital
Red-
needs they need to be added, and also there should also be some type of notation that there should be some type of percentage of community hiring. We have talked about this for, I think it's been talked about since my mother used to serve on the board, and she's dead. And if you see the projects that are done in Red Hook and the millions upon millions of dollars that are spent, maybe we get one worker that works on the project and millions of dollars are being spent.
Okay.
So
That's
there has
noted.
to be a lot of language that's put
I
in
think
there.
because it's a national bill, I think what we can say is that capital needs must be determined with the input from residents.
Yep, that has to be there, but they're also, I don't care if it's national or if it's local, it also has to say that we need community hire.
Yes, and that I have that down. Rick and Mark, you still have your hands up? Did you both want to add to that list? Put your hand down, Rick.
I'll put my hand down too.
Okay, so I have
electrical upgrading inside wiring.
Well, the reason I just hesitate to do that is because, as I said, since this is a national bill, then it may be different. There may be different capital needs for different places in the country. So I think what's critical is that we will frame it so that the capital needs respond specifically to residents, the failures that the residents are living with now, and they have to be part of that planning process.
Right, but you have to be specific in detail whether it's national or not, because we're looking at the interior, because the FEMA money is going to take care of everything on the exterior.
Well, I don't, okay, that's, but, okay. Let me just go through the list again, that for this particular, for the amendments that we're not going to write them right now, but we're just listing them and then we'll circulate. One is, accountability for where the funding, how the funding is dispersed, oversight for how it is spent, some requirement for reforms at the city level in terms of how it is spent, and tailoring the capital needs to what is required by the residents with their input. And then the fifth thing is about the percentage of community hire. I don't know if that's going to be, are you suggesting that it should be more than what's the section 3 or whatever section Dan referred to? Are you asking for more than that?
It should. Section 3 usually doesn't help because it makes you have to have all of these prerequisites in order to be able to be hired.
So let's make it, we can make a note of that, because if this is one of those, systemic changes that could be tied to this if we choose to do that.
Well, and section 3 just changed, Karen. So
I know
there's a new rule that you have to make the hires within 1 mile of where the work is being done. So
I know that, but Karen, I still like to put the wording in, because even though that's said, we all know that it doesn't happen at times.
Yeah, I was going to say that too, Ariel, that you really need that wording in there. And you could just mirror it from the new regulation, which says that the hires have to come from within 1 mile of the construction or the capital improvement. Okay. So that would cover our district public housing, Okay. So, yeah.
Okay, so I have the five points on the amendment. And I guess we'll, as I said, we'll prepare a draft of this and circulate it to the committee and people can comment.
And
we'll-
then one final thing, once you fix the buildings, you need to know how is that going to be sustained? So it's not just the money to fix the infrastructure, it is the sustainability of the buildings going forward. So after everything is fixed, how is that going to be maintained? Are we going to create a conservancy for the landscape? And what about the interior? Are you working with the NYCHA union, non-union, competitive? Those things have to be answered, or we're just giving money for a temporary fix because you have to maintain the infrastructure. So that was a big issue when they used to use, they used to do everything manually, and they were able to train a lot of the residents vocationally. But now with these newer systems and with the greenhouse gas reductions that we need to meet by 2030, people need to learn more how to read controls and be more like a stationary engineer as opposed to someone who's doing manual work.
Well, that's really important. I don't know if a capital emergency bill can handle all that, but that could be part of, I mean, that's incredibly important. I'm not sure. Do other people think we can add that to a capital emergency bill, or just something that has to remain, part of our, ongoing efforts to change the system, which is, a much bigger question. Thoughts on that? In that case, I'll leave it in for now and we'll see where it goes. I think it's an incredibly important point. I'm just afraid of, there's while it's a lot of money, it's a lot of capital work that needs to be done. And I think the job trainings and particularly when you talk about sustainability of you're talking about maintenance and ongoing management, but also, these what goes in, and this is something I would add, sort of to follow along with the Green New bill, is that we have to make sure that what they put in is going to meet those requirements of energy efficiencies for 2050. So that's going to be important too.
Yeah, and maybe they could waive the vouchers, the payments. So, back, I think during Giuliani's time, they combined everything into something called DCAS, the Department of, what is it? It's almost like the admin for the city.
Yeah.
So all of the jobs go through there, including the Section 3 hires. But on this end, as a public person looking for a job, if I go there, I have to pay a fee. They can waiver the fee if I say I don't have any money, but that fee should automatically be waived for public housing residents in our district with all the construction that's going on. Why would we impede them and restrain them from getting work because they don't have $60 to pay the fee, to take the exam or to apply for the
Okay. That's a really good point too. Once again, I think that may be a local city issue that requires advocacy.
I'd like to chime in on that. If you're on public assistance and you apply for a job in DCAS, if you show your budget letter, it will be waived, the fee.
Right, but we're not on public assistance. What's happening is we're still below the poverty line. So anybody making under $57,000 this year in New York would be eligible for a Section 3 hire. So even though, I make somewhere in the 40s, it's still an issue when you're paying 30% of your gross income to rent in New York City Housing Authority. They say it's adjusted, but it's not adjusted, especially for somebody, in my age category whose children are grown. It's straight up 50% of my actual net that I'm paying here. And so I don't have that extra $60. If I want to take 3 tests, 60, I'm not on public assistance. And the numbers of people in Red Hook on public assistance is in the single digit. So that wouldn't work for an area like Red Hook. Maybe some areas do have more double-digit figures where they have a lot of people on, on welfare, but Red Hook is not one of those areas, so that wouldn't work for Red Hook.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so just to move this along, we don't have a motion to vote on tonight. We're gonna create the motion, just circulate it. And Rick, you did this for the Governor's Island. We were able to vote by email, right? So we'll do that prior to the March meeting. Did I have that correct? In terms of how we move forward?
Rick, you're muted.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was saying, as a committee, I think we can do it by email, but the full board would have to approve within a Zoom meeting.
So we'll circulate a draft to the committee, and then once everyone is good with that, we'll present it to the board at the March meeting. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep, that works.
Okay. Great. Any other anything else that anyone from the committee wants to bring up? I know we left off at the end of the last meeting. There was a lot of discussion about working together on groups around the Gowanus zoning. It appears that we can make a group if we want to, but there isn't any groups being made at the board level, at least not at this time yet. So I know I've talked to a couple people offline. If anybody, the plans for Gowanus are certainly out there. We don't have the BEIS yet, so we're waiting for that still. We can also just hold tight until we have more of that information, because a lot of the questions that have been raised relate to the environmental impact statement. So let me know if you have any thoughts about that. Alec, I know you were engaged with trying to do a smaller group meeting around the IBZ. I don't know if that's gone forward or not.
Well, I was waiting for guidance on
Yeah,
how to move forward. I mean, I think we just need to get down to doing the work, and then we can circulate for people's thoughts. And so I can follow up on that email chain about that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it seems that there was a sense that there would people who are interested in doing sort of more focused responses would sort of either form themselves into group, or there would be one, a group that would be working on it. But there's so many different issues to dig into that I'm not quite sure how that would work. The answer is that there hasn't yet been any formation of any kind of working groups. So, okay. If anyone has anything else to say, thank you very much, everyone. That was a good evening.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, good night.
Nice night, everyone. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.